What's the biggest myth about third-party risk that needs to die ASAP?
It's hard to solve.
One red flag in a vendor assessment you never ignore.
An ability to say that we are clean.
TPRM, is this a compliance checkbox or a real security tool?
Or it's a real security tool, 100%.
What's worse, too much access or not enough visibility?
Worse is too much access.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Cyber Risk Podcast. This is your host, Resha Chheda. I am head of product marketing at Safe Security. Last time, we had a great talk with Lindsay Baker, and we dug into the nitty-gritty details of TPRM. This time, we're going to go one step deeper. What if third-party risk management was insider threat in disguise? And to unpack this, we've got somebody who's been deep into the trenches, Hardik Mehta. Now, Hardik has built and led security programs at a global scale, advised CISOs, and flagged more vendor vulnerabilities than most teams even know exist. Welcome to the show, Hardik. So excited to have you here.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Resha, for having me on this Friday, beautiful summer afternoon. I'm Hardik Mehta. I just started a new role at JPMorgan Chase. I'm the global head of regulatory and contractual compliance. That means all the assessments under the sun are in my remit. You name it, FedRAMP to GDPR to CCPA to SWIFT to CHAPS to HKMA and some big ones like SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI. 45 days into the role, prior to that, I was the head of cyber risk at Uber. Just moved the family from West Coast to East Coast, and 20 years practicing risk. Generally, have been in the trenches with three big problems which I like to solve. One is cyber risk quantification. That is one of my passion where I really like to lean in. Second is how do we optimize technology to make our security life much more easier. And the third one is driving clarity for CISOs, chief risk officers, and board of directors.
So let's start with the basics. How would you define insider threat today? And how has that definition changed over the last decade?
Great question, Resha. So third-party risk, when I started my career with ADP 2007, 2008, it was like someone standing with a spear or a sword in front of your vendors. It was very much getting vendors onboarded, having a vendor management program, and then looking at your risk register once a year. And it was very much point in time. You assess a vendor, you say it's high risk or critical risk, forget about it, and then you do millions of business, and then you review that, put a check mark on it again the next year. Fast forward 2020, post-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID, everyone went virtual. So that became an incredible challenge for enterprises. To scale that technical arm, and that's when all these vendors came in. A lot of virtualization brought in a lot of benefits, but it also brought in what we call as tech debt. And with tech debt, we are now looking at a bigger footprint of support arms. So all the tech giants now have support arms all across the globe, which is at least 2 times bigger than what it was in 2020. You have the third parties and the fourth parties, and the risk register, which was traditionally looked once a year, sometimes even twice a year, is completely out of the window. And now we are talking real-time risk with AI coming in, and agentic AI coming in, and then non-human accounts coming in. So the threat landscape changed. Complexity changed, the scale changed, and along with that, how vendors actually do business with us has completely changed. So it is a biggest headache for both procurement and the cyber arms or the security arms to first even put a wrapper around it. But once you even have a wrapper, it's now a bigger headache to go and look at that needle in a haystack of what can go wrong. And then 9 out of 10 times, all these big breaches in last 4 to 5 years, at least twice a year, you'll see your vendor was actually hacked or your vendor had a huge data breach and then you are paying a lot of fines because of that, or you're losing a lot of your customers because now your customers don't trust you.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. We have this new way of doing business and we've accepted that as the new reality. But we haven't updated our security model or the way we manage third-party risk to match it, right? And attackers have versus we have not. So that's kind of interesting, right? And that kind of lets me segue into our next question, right? So you said before that many companies, vendors hold more power than actual employees, right? You just said that like they have a lot more access now. So can you go a little deeper, maybe give an examples of what you mean by that?
Sure. Two examples. One of them is when you onboard a vendor, initially it was very simple to just replicate an access model which your employees had. And that access model was always looked maybe once a quarter. And at really big Fortune 50 enterprises, 100% once a quarter, but then Fortune 300, 400 and below once a year. And that was still okay because the mitigating controls and compensating controls, plus your SOC 1s and SOC 2s would justify to your regulators as well as your customers that you're doing business with the highest amount of integrity. With the new way of doing business where you want your vendor to have full keys to the kingdom, the access models have completely changed. The vendors now are not only getting the least privileged accesses, but they are sometimes getting the highest privilege as access parameters granted as soon as they get onboarded. The reason can be we need to onboard quickly. The ramp up time is too less. We need to solve some really hairy problems, or we need to be 24/7 available in some of the services. What brings to the forefront of it is and I'm ex-Uber. I have a lot of respect for Uber, and I have a lot of respect for all the what do you say, gig economy companies, Instacart, Lyft. But what is happening is all these gig economies, you have to segregate three different stratas of your vendor management profiles. One is, do we really need access at that granular level? Number one. Number two, when you do a big footprint of your vendor who is just your, AV vendor or a call support vendor for your gig economy workers, or just a payroll vendor, do you really put them into a pyramid and say, out of my 16,000 vendors, I'm going to look at only 100 with a different lens and then the rest 15,000 plus with a very different lens? When do you look at them? So that's the second strata. And then the third strata, which is really hard to put your arms around, is all your employees now want to actually go and do a lot of work with the AI-based solutions. So when AI-based solutions come in, and we treat them as a vendor as well. So if your employees say open ChatGPT for me at enterprise-wide, or open Copilot for me, or Anthropic to me, or DeepSeek to me, what are the vendor management protocols do you follow? How do you look that as an emerging risk? Do you put your traditional vendor risk management hat and let them go through procurement and then do the whole 9 yards? Do you put a different guardrail? It is just a lot of these questions which people do not think through. They onboard the vendor, and then after at least 6 to 8 weeks, when the pain point starts coming in, or you see your attack surface completely changing or increasing, it becomes evident that you should have think through before even signing that PO.
Makes sense. No, and you mentioned a couple of, key points into what's kind of fundamentally broken currently with third-party risk management. You talked about, us giving default, instead of default, deny and zero trust, following the zero trust model, we're giving all access. So can you summarize maybe 3 or 4 things on what, according to you, currently is fundamentally broken with the current state of third-party risk management?
Yes, I'll do three big parameters, and I want to give a shout out to Pat O'Pat. Very few people know, but I just joined JPMorgan Chase as the head of global risk function. And then Pat is one of the guiding lights in the security industry. he just wrote an open letter before RSA this year. Resha, I don't know if you have read that, but it is an open letter to third-party suppliers coming in from his lens and a lot of CISO's lens and then a lot of practitioners' lens, which is, are you really prioritizing security or rushing your features? Are you building comprehensive security in your stack by default? Second one is, are you working collaboratively to prevent the abuse of interconnected systems, which is if you have access to all keys of the kingdom, are you reducing that access by your own goodwill, or you're actually even informing your client that, hey, I have full blown access, I should not, what should I do, and so on and so forth. And then the last one is, how are you looking at your risk models? Because the traditional risk models are completely out of the window. So are you iterating on your risk models? Are you looking at risk quantification engines? Are you quantifying things better and then making it 0 and 1 for your board of directors? And explaining it in both the dollar terms as well as the impact term, so that it becomes easier for them to put their head around it and say, yes, this is really a problem. Let us not do business with them, or we need XYZ done before we sign that big PO.
No, I think those are such key points. And, I've seen firsthand, Hardik, like companies that pride themselves over their TPRM programs. But when you really dig into them, you realize it's more of like an administrative program rather than, strategic piece. And like you mentioned, vendors themselves, it's funny. Vendors have higher privileges than their own internal users, which is really, really a scary part, right? That's the problem we are seeing. Let's kind of pivot a little bit to how we can fix it, right? So what do you think, Hardik, would be a best case solution or a solution for this? Like if vendors are truly insiders now, how should security leaders be thinking about this differently?
I would say a combination of your old school guardrails. I would say appended with a modern philosophy. And what do I mean by appended with modern philosophy? The modern philosophy is treat your vendors with the same rigor, the same governance mechanism, and hold them accountable as they are your own. So bring them really into the culture, not only like the culture of your firm, but the tech culture, where I mean that they will have to undergo the same rigorous protocols, which is like, say, bi-weekly user access reviews, monthly privilege escalation management, oversight. Then you also have to look at all of their open exposure across their own stack. I also recommend that once a quarter, you look at what is emerging in the market in terms of all the walls which are open, which are in the same space. If it's a cloud vendor, most of them are right now cloud vendors. So what is impacting, say, an S3 bucket overall in the cloud space right now? What are the open threats? What are the SS scores based on those open threats? Are the vendors actually looking at them with the same lens as you are looking? In fact, in both of my organizations before this, one was a big cloud provider and then I just left Uber. We had them completely match our common control framework. So the common control framework was integrated with MITRE, and then all the TTPs, and I just go a little technical, were integrated directly into NIST CSF, into NIST AI-RMF, and then we were looking at the vendors to match that common control framework and to conduct the risk assessments, especially the critical and high risk vendors, in a very similar format as we conduct. And then we calibrate their risk as well before we actually open a workload which can be mission critical. So on the internal side, you also have to start segregating your workloads and say, can I open these APIs, these services, and these workloads to these vendors? And if yes, then what are my parameters to open it? How do I open it? How frequently I put my governance checks on it? And then how do I automate it? Because that automation feature is key. If you cannot automate it, cannot control it, and cannot see it on a dashboard, then even doing it once and putting it on a spreadsheet will be a good start, but then you'll always be chasing a tail.
No, it's a very valid point, Hardik. Let me ask you this. You mentioned you got technical. You mentioned integrating MITRE TTPs with NIST CSF, right? Do you find that the third-party analysts on a normal basis, like generally speaking, or even on the vendor side, are they technical enough where they are able to deep dive, or they are looking for something quick and easy?
I would say it's an 80-20 split. 80% of them are looking for something quick and easy. It is not their bread and butter. 9 out of 10 times they even will roll an eye and say, I don't think I can even do half of what you're trying to get it done. And I appreciate that, honestly. And then that's where, as I said, the industry is running at a crazy speed. And then for us to catch up, you have to think about the agility, the pace, and the business value. And then if you want all three, you have to rethink, do you want to be in the age-old mechanism of putting a GRC solution in, getting in a vendor management module, and then doing the vendor management whole life cycle in a very traditional way? Or do you want to flip it, and do you want to do it from bottoms up and say, let me design the risk profile, let me design my risk appetite, let me understand my services and what I'm willing to open up, what is my risk threshold, and once I have that, I integrate that with a GRC engine on top of it, and use the risk profile and the risk quantification levers to drive my GRC decision making. And I know it sounds completely reverse, but I've seen a couple of big organizations do it in this fashion, and in fact, a couple of big DoD and government organizations are also doing it in this fashion. And mission critical systems are actually getting much more, their value for money. And they're also able to select vendors which are going neck and neck with them in terms of technical innovation, transformation, able to replicate their speed and agility along with building in their security and risk posture together with them. And I think that is a way, at least in next 3 to 5 years, because if you cannot match the speed and the agility of your opponents, some of them are nation state actors who will embed XYZ exploits into your vendor managed stack. You as an organization who's hiring these vendors will always be responsible for either a big data breach, either a big financial fine, or a combination of both.
Absolutely. And one bold prediction?
One bold prediction is AI vendor management is going to be the next big thing. And what I mean by that is a lot of the old school vendor management processes, which are very, very, I would say, data oriented, and the big challenge is how do I look at that haystack? How do I find the needle? When was my vendor last managed, and all that can be completely packaged and done by AI. But at the same time, that will also be the biggest con, that now you're using too much machine power, and not a lot of man in the middle to basically sort out that fluff.
Is that not helpful?
It is helpful, but I still feel that at least when you have a very clear risk appetite and a risk, I would say, matrix, and then you know that these are my top 10 vendors, which I'm doing at least, say, 80% of my business with, or all my critical workloads are with them, there always should be someone in between who will try to rationalize what the AI is spitting out, rather than just completely believing on that AI output and increasing your reliance on that AI. So I still believe that there should be either a process or either a governance mechanism when you start looking at all your high risk vendors and the data sets associated with it, to justify, rationalize, and optimize the outputs. And then, do you want to do business with them again? And if yes, then what has changed? And then And if you cannot justify that what has changed and then how they're responding to what has changed, that becomes a big problem.
So you're saying basically AI with human oversight, and then ensure that there is credibility and accuracy and defensibility for the outputs.
Yes, 100%. AI with human intervention, especially for high and critical risk vendors.
Absolutely. That makes sense. So Hardik, let's do something different. I'm going to ask you a few questions, very rapid fire style. So tell me, what's the biggest myth about third-party risk that needs to die ASAP?
The biggest myth of third-party risk which needs to die ASAP is it's hard to solve.
That is very deep. I mean, you're right. If things are systemized, organized, it is not that much of a difficult problem to solve. All right, let's go to the next one. One red flag in a vendor assessment you never ignore.
An ability to say that we are clean. So they come back and say, we do not have any walls open. We are not working on any security programs, and we are as green as we can be. We have managed all our vulnerabilities on time, patched every server on time, and we have an end-to-end program which is looking at it like a hawk. If I see something of that nature, I don't trust that, because the biggest of the biggest corporations are chasing their tail.
Interesting. All right, TPRM, is this a compliance checkbox or a real security tool?
Or it's a real security tool. 100%.
I think I know what you're going to answer, but what's worse, too much access or not enough visibility?
Worse is too much access.
I would go too much access too, but I do know people who will say not enough visibility and, just do default access. All right. Last one. If you could fix one thing in how companies handle third-party risk, what would it be?
Bring them into your risk portfolio, and then quantify the risk and put them through the same rigors as you would put in any of your service lines.
Excellent. So Hardik, this has been so much fun. But before we wrap up, if you had to leave our listeners with one message, what would it be?
Great question. I'll leave the listeners with one message, which is a very deep one, is to not rush in hiring a vendor, because the vendor is promising every single feature to you, especially in this AI space. Do your due diligence, implement all the rigorous traditional checklist protocols, but also all the new techniques which you can. Some of them are very easy, very available. A lot of them are open source, in fact, in terms of integrating your threat models, your cloud exposure, philosophies, plus your traditional GRC audit philosophies into one. Combine both of them, where you are not only just relying on your traditional SOC 1, SOC 2s of the house, but you're actually using a threat-based very forward risk predictive service, and a service which just not give you a score. A lot of those services, you pay and you get a score that, hey, I am going to use www.xyz.com, and www.xyz.com is super green, super safe. They're 100 on 100 or 95 on 100. Just don't rely on that score. I'll not use the vendors who do that. They give you a score. But in fact, do not trust that score. Do a lot of your due diligence. Package it up, and look at their risk threshold like your risk threshold, and then go forward.
Well, Hardik, thank you so much. That was really sharp and very, very timely, considering all the different third-party related breaches we hear today.
Yes.
I really appreciate having you over.
No, my pleasure, Resha. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Cyber Risk Podcast. If this episode gave you something to think about, please share it. Stay tuned for the next episode.